Welcome back to our Met Orchestra Musicians Roundtable. Again, we're very lucky to have with us four of the people who always get the warmest response from the Met audience after virtually any opera, the Met Orchestra. Thank you so much for being here. Again, these people were, at least three of them, were playing the show last night until 11:30 p.m., so we're very appreciative of you. We have French hornist. I think I've got you in order of seniority. Forgive me if not. French horn Anne Scharer, who's been at the Met since the 1996-7 season, and second horn since 2016. How many revivals of Tannhäuser have you? Must be several at this point.
This is my second time playing it, and I'm actually back on fourth horn now.
Oh, okay.
I've made the rounds.
Okay. This is something that we want to show you. The musicians made this. It's a Grand March transcription for largely for brass and the bass drum, cymbals, and triangle. And they gave this to the Wagner Society. I think Anne was instrumental in this, and appreciation of our support for them. Violinist Wen Qian has been a first violinist. Now you'll have to correct me if the first violinist with the Metropolitan since 1997, and serves as acting assistant concertmaster. I hope that the web is still correct on that.
Right now, no, not anymore.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but it's constantly. Actually, over the 25 years I was there probably for the most 10 years I was acting. Because sometimes they find the people, sometimes someone leaves, and it just, yeah.
So it's fluid then.
Yeah, it's ongoing. Like you never know next time.
And you were brought up in China, but also worked in Germany, and as I understand, trained at Mannes.
Mannes, yes.
Yes, where you now teach.
Yes.
When you're not at the Metropolitan Opera. Principal clarinet Anton Rist, Rist.
Just Rist.
Just Rist. Seems appropriate. Was appointed as such in 2016. Is this then the first series of this opera you've played at the Met?
It is, yes. Yeah.
And Principal Harp Hannah Cope Johnson. This must be the first series you've played at the Met.
Yes.
Because you're pretty much brand new from Sarasota Symphony.
That's right. Yep.
After training at the New England Conservatory. So thanks very much to all of you. And the first question, I'll come sit with you, but the first question to all of you, I also asked the singers, had you seen or heard Tannhäuser, which is no longer as commonly performed as it used to be, before you played it? I talked to one of your violinist colleagues recently who said, I finally saw the Zeffirelli Bohème. And I said, you're kidding me. I was in high school. Started that. And he said, I'd played it a million times, but I'd never seen it. His wife said, you're going to watch it. And he did. So you still may not have seen the Tannhäuser production, but I wanted to ask, what were your first impressions of working in this score and of hearing the score?
Well, just like every Wagner, it's amazing. It's always feeling, your blood is boiling by the end of the overture. It's like, oh my God. So, yeah, they always give me that feeling. I mean, Wagner, every time you play it, is always just really satisfying from every way.
I agree completely. It's one of those things that you go into it sort of with this idea that, okay, I'm going to be here for 4 hours, for 5 hours, 6 hours, and then you start playing it, and it's like the time flies by. Everything is you're getting all that energy right back, even if it's the most lyrical sections. You're always really involved in the total picture. So every time there's a Wagner opera, I'm really looking forward to it. So I love it.
My first experience looking at the part was similar to any harpist looking at any Wagner part. I was amazed at how difficult the part was.
Yeah. So Tannhäuser was my first Wagner opera that I played. Actually, my first season And at that time I was playing third horn, and it's really tiring. And I was like, whoa, Wagner is really hard. I'd only ever played like an overture, but this is like I think it's a 10-minute overture, and it's constant playing. So I was blown away, but it's also so beautiful, and it's been fun this second time around playing Tannhäuser again, and I'm just enjoying, I don't know, the way the motives flow through the whole opera. There's this arc, and it's just such incredibly beautiful music. I'm just really appreciating it. Second time.
Had any or all of you played in the overture? I know the overture is a very popular concert piece. So had you played it separately as orchestras at some point?
Yes, I have. But it's after the Met, though, not before.
I played it about 2 years ago, actually. I'm part of this orchestra called the All-Star Orchestra.
That's right. We were together. That's it.
And that we did the first 20 minutes. So what is that? The overture and then the Venusberg music. And that is the most tiring part of the opera. But if you can get through that, then you're set. At least in the clarinet section, then you're set. But just getting through the first 20 minutes, that is a killer.
Well, yeah, the clarinets, bassoon, and horn, very much prominently the horn. How do you achieve that ensemble? Maybe it's a naive question, but it's been a long time. They put down my clarinet at age 12, just starting it so soft, and everyone, how is it possible? Just rehearsal?
Well, it's hard in the pit because usually the horns and clarinets are really far apart. And so for Tannhäuser, we are a little bit closer, but still not close enough that we can really sort of fit into each other's sounds. But when we rehearsed this downstairs, the horns were right behind the clarinets, and it was really easy to sort of start off on the right foot and sort of get everyone listening the right way and trying to blend, so that then when we got into the pit, even though there's more of a distance, we're still kind of listening for the same things. We're still sort of thinking about it the same way, so at least we, we'll meet somewhere that is close enough.
I think it must be interesting for audience members because, especially the Met Orchestra, we play so far behind the beat of the conductor. You almost see it, bum, bum. You know what I mean? So we do develop a timing as an orchestra, and we do get used to each other, so it's also a feeling and just listening, getting used to someone's tendencies. If someone's leading with the melody, you just try to listen to them while you're playing and follow and know when you have the line and know when you don't, and you should be a group player,
Is that horn at the beginning, is that an audition test piece?
It's not usually. No.
Are there for any of you, things? I know there's a clarinet. This becomes a big trombone fest after a while, the overture, but there's also a wonderful clarinet melody that comes in. Kind of the sensuousness of Venus is what it seems to represent. Are any pieces in the overture, or indeed in the opera, things that you might be asked for at an audition?
Yes, I played his Act 1, Tannhäuser's Act 1 aria was on the audition for this position. So.
Well, they must have known this was coming up.
Yeah, I think so.
It's a harp concerto.
Yeah.
The rehearsals downstairs, it was like a private recital for us all.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. It's fun to play with everyone. A lot more fun than practicing it alone. So.
Quick question. Is it the longest harp part of any opera, basically?
Not at all, actually. It's typical of Wagner in that the harp is used as a special effect, and most of the opera I'm sitting there waiting to play, not playing. Other like Puccini uses harp throughout. You're not sitting there for more than a minute waiting. You're usually playing, so it's typical Wagner. It's like, special effect. Yeah.
Well, it also seems to me the harp in this, it's both coloristic, as in the overture, it's evoking something, but also what they call diegetic music. It's music that's meant to be music. They're up there singing, but it's speaking often. But sometimes, as with Wolfram and Tannhäuser, and indeed Bitterhoff, well, Tannhäuser, when he picks up the harp to sing to Venus, and then again in the song contest, even Bitterhoff, there's a harp under there. And I wondered if you'd ever interacted with either in this opera or in others, Capriccio, it could be, where a singer has asked you for advice on looking convincing as a harpist?
No, not this time. But I actually, I have written in my part, I know who's singing during the song contest. I assume Bitterolf has a harp too that he plays, maybe not. I haven't seen the show. But I know who's singing, and the writing, Wagner's writing, it actually changes depending on which character is singing. For example, Wolfram, every time he sings the harp part, it uses the full range of the instrument. Lots of arpeggios that start from the bass all the way up to the treble of the instrument, as opposed to when Tannhäuser and Bitterolf are singing, there is more of like a repetitive, like a plucking sort of texture. And so every time I'm playing it, I know who's singing, and I try to keep that in mind. Like, I'm not just playing the notes on the page, I'm trying to show the character and the different character that is singing at that time.
That makes sense, because Wolfram, although they're given the theme by the Landgraf, still Wolfram is such an artist, and as we heard from Mr. Gerhard, such an intellectual. He has this kind of thing in his mind. He can produce it in full elegance, whereas Tannhäuser, it's a reaction, and then Bitterolf is a reaction to him. Mm-hmm. So as you say, very differently characterized.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How about, do you have the rest of you, characters that you need to watch out for or understand? Because Elizabeth, in the third act aria, the Gebet, the prayer, there's a clarinet in there, which is kind of underpinning.
There is, and that is such an incredible part of the piece, and by the time we get to it, it is the hardest thing in the world for the wind section to play and make sure it's in tune and it sounds sort of has the texture and the sort of purity of an organ is what we're all going for. And so there's little fragments of that sort of organ texture throughout the piece that will sort of, okay, now we're doing this. Now we're sort of foreshadowing what's Elizabeth's prayer. What can we do to sort of blend as well as we can? So it's sort of more like a group sort of zone we'll get into. But no, that whole section is really quite painful to play.
And how many
Sounds
people,
great.
Sorry, how many people it does sound great. How many people are playing at that point?
It's
in your section?
Both bassoons, clarinet, bass clarinet, both oboes, and both flutes. But it starts mostly with the clarinets and bassoons are trading off these chords and just trying to make sure because very often vibrato can hide some pitch problems. And if we're trying to sound like an organ, we can't really use vibrato the way we would normally. And so just trying to achieve that clarity, that purity it's really, we all dread that section.
Well, it sounds great. The other day. And how about the horns in the overture at the start? How many people are actually playing?
Well, the very beginning is just first and second horn with the winds, and occasionally third and fourth join in. And the horn is lucky in the orchestra because we do get to play as a brass instrument, as the brass section, but we also really are a woodwind, element as well. And it's such a pleasure to play both sides of the colors, basically. I was going to say something interesting about the horn parts in Tannhäuser. He actually says first and second horn, and then the third and fourth are actually first and second Waldhorn, which means forest horn, which actually what he did was Wagner wrote for two valved horns, first and second, and third and fourth, or first and second Waldhorn, are actually played on the natural horn, so a valveless horn. And he wanted to achieve smoothness in the lyricism. So sometimes the third and fourth are playing by themselves with the woodwinds, or sometimes it's the first and second, like at the beginning. And it's interesting because I think, like, for example, Tannhäuser, I think, was first performed in 1845, and the valved horn was only first developed in, 1814 by Heinrich Stölzel. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Anyway, so it was still, the valved horn was pretty crude still at the time, and so Wagner, I think, sometimes preferred the lyricism of a natural horn. It was just a little smoother, although some of the notes were stopped, like using the hand to create sharps and flats, but also you can imagine, like in those days, you would come in with your horn and a box of crooks. And maybe some of you know what the crooks are. You would lengthen and shorten the horn by taking out a little piece. Like the lead pipe would have like maybe one little loop here and then the coil of the natural horn. So you'd have like the short ones, the small crooks were higher keys, and then the ones that had many more loops were like a lower key because it was a longer tube, making it a lower instrument. So we'll have in our part play an E. So you'd have your E crook, and then it'd be like, oh, change now, like 2 lines later, be like, now you're in C. So you have to take your crook out, put it in your box, take your other crook out. Oh, here's my C crook. I hope got the right one. Put it in, put your mouthpiece in, and play the next, phrase in a different key. So I think it's fascinating that Wagner did that. He did that also in Hollander. And Brahms later continued to just use the natural horn in his writing. So it's just fascinating. I don't know. And I love the name forest horn. I think it's so cool.
Well, there's also, I'm trying to think if it's in Siegfried or Götterdämmerung, there's the Alphorn. Have you ever encountered that?
Yes. Yes, I've had to play it, but we actually don't play it on an Alphorn at the Met. We combined, I don't know where this tradition came, but maybe they didn't have an Alphorn. But they put a trombone with a Wagner tuba backstage to create a rustic effect. But honestly, we could bring in an Alphorn. I don't know. For some reason, that's the way we've been doing it.
Maybe now with more interest in original instruments, when there are more Alphornists are training at the conservatories.
Yeah.
When they did the Schulte recording with the Vienna Philharmonic, at least as John Kulshaw relates it, Schulte made them go up into the Alps and find an Alphornist, some old guy no one had ever seen before that knew that tradition, and it sounds like it on the recordings. They said, well, we don't, what? So maybe there'll be more of them in future. What about for violins? This it sounds particularly the Venus music in the overture, like you're very busy in there. What's the experience like of? I know this is one of your favorite Wagners to play.
Yes. This piece is very actually playable. Like Götterdämmerung, and like this 16 notes is unplayable. So yeah, we always often say it's effect. It's not meant for every note. Anyway, so this one is actually playable, and so actually that part when we is being divided to many stands. So maybe 2 and 3 together, 2 and 4 together. And every time when a conductor comes, it's done differently. So in the beginning, my first time playing, and it was many years ago, with Lamagne, I believe, it was very scary. All of a sudden, like, you have to play this solo, and then only 2 people play. If the next person is not making too much sound, and then all of a sudden feel like empty, and then the next person stand play is like 2 stand away. So it's always very scary, but this time thankfully they made the first, I think, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th stand playing together. That made it so much better. We feel like, hey, we're a unit, and it's really fun to play that part. Yes.
Are there other parts that you look forward to or that you would characterize as painful?
I would say throughout the whole thing, it's really because it's really satisfying because it's technical, but yet you can hear the clarity of it, and also another thing about this opera, that Wagner is very kind to strings, because usually it's so heavy throughout the first act, second act, the third act. It's also heavy, especially the worst one is Meistersinger. The last act is 2 hours, it's nonstop. So by the end, you're like absolutely tired, and this one is so kind because he put the first act the hardest. And then the second act is hard and challenging, but it's a little shorter. And then when they got to the third act, we're on vacation. So it's so much easier, the third act, so you can actually, pay so much attention. Now I can take a little break. So this opera is one of the best, for sure, from Wagner.
So in the position of Kundry and Parsifal, who sings and sings and sings in 1 and 2 and gets very high and soprano-ish, and then in Act 3 has 2 words to sing, Dienen, Dienen. But then you have to act the rest of the part too, but just you get a bit of a vacation.
Yeah.
Well, actually, I wanted to ask all of you about that. Are there places, and I thought maybe you can do it in the third act, are there places in a performance of Tannhäuser where you can take a break and check your email or walk off stage or go get something to drink, or are you there continually?
That's the trombones and the trumpets. We work pretty hard.
No, actually, we talked about it in the third act. We're like, hey, maybe we can go out too.
Yeah, we're a little jealous.
Clarinets?
We have some moments where we can, but also, so in this run of Tannhäuser, the clarinet section, we have an assistant. And so if there's a fortissimo section, one or two fortissimo sections in the piece, I will sort of just lay out and let the assistant play. That's not usually the case, though, but because I'm also playing Florencia, and there were several days where there was Florencia and then Tannhäuser, I needed some sort of break. So a lot of the fortissimo stuff I give to the assistant.
And for
Yeah.
you?
As I said before, I'll have 20 minutes between entrances. I think most of them, it's about 20 or 30 minutes. And sometimes I sneak out of an act early. But I actually really like sitting there and listening a lot of the time. It's an amazing seat to enjoy the music. So.
Do you have a lot of singers bristle when asked, do you listen to a recording before you prepare a part? You say, no, I want to have my own way. I don't care what Lotte Lehmann did or whatever. And I find instrumentalists seem a little more open just to listening to a recording, not to follow it faithfully necessarily or slavishly, but when you're preparing a new score, is that part of your process?
It absolutely is for me, especially I'm young in my career and I haven't played anything that I'm playing this year before. So that's an essential element to me, absorbing and being prepared to play. And I do try to listen to multiple renditions so that I don't get persuaded with any one way of expressing the music.
I absolutely listen to recordings. It helps me prepare because we know who we're, playing with. Maybe we're answering someone's other phrase, or, I have a line here, like I was saying before. Or, I don't have the line. I need to play under. And it just makes me more comfortable just listening to it orally. We don't have to follow exactly what they did, but it's interesting to do. And then you have to react to whoever's conducting and the singers. It's amazing to me how different each opera can sound with different casts and different conductors. It changes the entire way it can be experienced. It's kind of amazing to me, the longer I've been at the Met, how each opera is different every time. It's a new gem.
For the other two, does the seating ever change in the course of a run, or is it pretty much set while you're rehearsing that the seating where everyone's going to be will be this way? Or can the conductor decide, no, I want you over there?
Well, it happened with Barenboim's Parsifal. Was it Parsifal? Parsifal. Tristan.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. The whole first violin was on the second violin side, and we were right in front of the oboes. And remember, it was very hard for us because I couldn't really hear myself at all. So whatever I played, I just hacked away. So it was because of the oboe were so loud. English horn also, it was so loud. I couldn't. Yeah, that was the only time I remember in Wagner we were in a different place. Yeah.
And the other two, to get back to.
So I'll counter a little bit what my colleague said. I think it's really important early on to really listen to the operas and get to know them. For the clarinet parts, they're not usually that technically difficult. So you can sort of go through the parts, and these parts have been played so many times. There's so many markings. Practice the difficult parts. But there's something kind of interesting about sort of discovering it a little bit in the rehearsals. And this sort of happened last year when I came in. I had to come in last minute for a Lohengrin. Sight read a performance, never heard it, never played a note of it in my life. And it was amazing. It was one of the most memorable performances that I've done at the Met because I was discovering it while I was playing it, both the part and how it sounds. And so this year with Tannhäuser, I sort of had a similar approach. And it's not just an excuse to sight read. I listened to sections of it, I practiced the hard parts, but then I sort of let the rest of it sort of, I wanted to kind of discover it in the rehearsals. And I thought that was really interesting. And again, the parts are so well marked with people that have played it before me saying, oh, this is with the oboe, this hands off to the horns, that you do feel like there's a bit of a security net. But for clarinets, at least, Wagner is not usually something that has to be really, practiced and really woodshed that much. It's nothing like the harp parts.
Yeah, so for violin or for strings, I think different where you're sitting has a lot to do with how you prepare. For sure, concertmaster has to know a code, and they know exactly when to come in because it looks bad if they didn't come in where they're supposed to. This second chair, which is also important. So every principal definitely have done their work, and I have to say, as you go back a little bit, the sight reading becomes really, really important. And then we have some colleagues amazing at it. I can hear them play every note. I know that they didn't practice. And it is so unbelievable that, so that's how it goes.
And what do you do after an opera, which is very taxing? If you're willing to divulge this. Are there operas which are easier or harder to recover from, and that you would need immediate food and drink, or to walk around the park, or what taxes you the most, and then what do you do in after an opera like that?
I mean, after a Wagner opera, I'm always sort of in denial that it's actually as late as it is. Because after Bohème, you go home, you have some food, you have a drink, you watch something, you relax. But with Wagner, you're getting home and it's almost midnight. You still want to do all those things. You can't just go straight to sleep. So I usually end up staying up pretty late on those nights just because I have all this energy from the show. I need to just sort of have a little bit of time to come down from it.
That's definitely one of the danger, late night eating, being opera singer and drinking. So I'm trying to cut it. But it is. I'm warning you.
Do you have any rituals?
I drive. Actually, I don't live in the city, so I drive home. So I kind of try to unwind in the car by listening to different music or nothing at all, or a podcast. I also read. That helps me just wind down.
What kinds of music do you listen to?
Oh my gosh, singer-songwriter music.
Yeah.
More like folky stuff, I guess. Totally different.
I confess I'm an opera critic these days, and people often will say, "Why is this country western in your car?" Or, wait a minute, you're listening to Haydn string quartets, and you need a break.
Yeah.
You need contrast, and to kind of wash between the operatic experience.
Yeah.
And how about you? And also physically, after an evening of harp.
Oh, yeah. Last night I went and got chicken shawarma from the food truck outside my apartment. That's what I did after I got back. I usually, like Anton said, I usually relax and watch an episode of The Office or something like that.
Oh, yeah, I said just eating and all that stuff. It's not healthy, I have to say. But yes, sometimes you go home, especially after Wagner opera, you're actually more awake because you're so inspired by the music. Unfortunately, it gets really late. Yeah, and especially the next morning as a 10:30 rehearsal, you suffer next night.
Yeah, it's true.
What are the other operas in each of your season? Well, starting with the harp, maybe, because as you say, it's kind of a specialist thing. What are the other harp-heavy things that you're preparing for?
This was definitely the biggest, the most demanding, I think, show this season for me. Coming up, we have, I'm playing all of these for the first time. And so I think these Puccini's coming up, Turandot and Madama Butterfly are more, I'm playing the whole time. And so it's something I need to absorb, a lot of information and music that I need to absorb. But nothing like this. This was certainly I mean, I'm playing just me and the singer. It's so it's so exciting. So this has been it for me. It's been great.
Harp Summit.
Yeah.
And for clarinet?
So the next big thing this season for clarinet is Forza del Destino, which doesn't come around that often, but in it, Verdi was he had this clarinet muse in mind that he was writing for. I think his name was Cavallini, and he wrote a bunch of etude books for clarinet. And so in this opera, Verdi writes for clarinet as though it's one of the roles on stage. So there's a lot of sort of extended aria-like things and accompanimental things. So I'm looking forward to that. And then also, I'm sort of at that point where it's like I've almost played all the standard stuff, but not quite yet. So I still have never played Trovatore. I don't know when we're doing that next, but I'm excited for that.
That has one of the great Verdi tenor arias in it, Forza, which we're not supposed to mention the name. It's like the Scottish play in opera, but a wonderful clarinet solo in that, where it's really in dialogue with the tenor. And for violins, it's almost a stupid question because
We play everything, so and almost like whatever you put in front of my stand, I will play.
What was this? Is it Nixon in China? There's something that has what am I thinking of?
Akhenaten.
Akhenaten, of course. Yeah.
Oh, that's my favorite opera. And so,
Did you just stay home, or did you actually go and see your colleagues play?
no, we didn't. We get to schedule for performance anyway. It's just that it's going to be a dark night. Yeah. But then it's kind of nice because you don't have rehearsals. Maybe for 2 weeks, no rehearsals. So that's kind of nice.
And for horn?
You're wondering what I'm looking forward to?
What are you looking for? What makes the most demands, and what pleases you most?
Okay. Well, I mean, Wagner is definitely up there. The Ring is it's the hardest thing I've ever played. It is really exhausting, but also so rewarding, like we were just talking about. But also Strauss is so exhilarating and fun for the horn. And I mean, honestly, it's funny. The Puccini is deceptively, it's light and fun, but it is actually pretty hard. So, I mean, now I know those operas so well, and it's nice because I don't even have to count the rest. I just know by ear when to come in, but it is challenging when you're new. You really have to study those. They're surprisingly tricky. But yeah, Strauss and Wagner are my favorites, but also love Mozart. So, yeah.
Have you played the Strauss Concerti ever?
I've played Strauss once. Strauss 2 for me is too hard. So.
Well, he was writing for and kind of about his father. It's one of the great tributes of a composer.
His father said it was unplayable.
Yes.
I kind of agree. No, I like practicing it, but to actually perform it with an orchestra, I think you need to be a soloist.
Comes up again in the 4 last songs, and then Capriccio, and kind of saying goodbye to his father in those moments. It is lovely, right?
So beautiful, yeah.
Oh, somebody asked me for you to clear up English horn versus French horn, because there's the English horns here, which I know are very different animals. And it was asking about, it's the hunting scene, I guess, where the English horns take part, in kind of rustic atmosphere.
Yeah, it's a bit obscure where the term French horn came from, but it's believed that obviously it was used as a hunting horn first, and then someone in France decided to put it in the orchestra for the first time, probably, I think, in the 17th century. So that's where the term is believed to be from. I could be corrected, but that's what I've read and heard. So, and the English horn, yeah, obviously is a woodwind instrument, and I don't know the connection with the name English for the English horn, but for the French horn, I think that's what basically happened. They just had to make a clarification instead of just horn. I think a lot of times, like in horn parts, it just says horn. We don't have French horn written there. It just says horn, and le corps in French, it's just horn. So sometimes people wanted to clarify that it was the brass instrument.
Well, we have a few more minutes if you're willing. Does anyone have questions?
Yes, a question for the harpist. You talk about the difficulty of the harp in this opera. When you play with Tannhäuser, you've got to play in 4 different keys. Because each time he sings his hymn to Venus, it's in a higher key.
Yes.
Is that a difficulty?
Not particularly. There's enough time between the key changes that I can reset my pedals, which is, yes, how I play in different keys. More of the difficulty comes from the sheer amount of notes written for each hand to simultaneously play at the same time. There's actually a couple parts that are unplayable as written by the composer, but that to me is just a testament of Wagner and his, big ideas and Gesamtkunstwerk. It's just like, yeah, he didn't take the time to check if it was playable. He more just had the vision of what he wanted it to sound like. So, yeah.
Please.
Who among the composers is the most playable?
Of any composer, I would say Ravel actually wrote the best for the harp. So far at the Met, I think Puccini makes the most sense to my hands.
It's funny you mentioned Puccini because for clarinet parts in Puccini, there's almost always one thing that is unplayable. And most composers are fine. Even Strauss, for the most part, is playable. In Puccini, there's almost always one thing that's unplayable. Yeah. I think Wagner, I would say, is the most playable, actually, for clarinet.
Well, I think Wagner probably the ring cycles. They're definitely good at them run. It's probably unplayable. But otherwise, everything else is not too bad. Wagner, I mean, yes, that's probably the most difficult one for violin. And Strauss as well. But Strauss is so, I don't know, he writes very well for the violin. It's technically difficult, but it's still, I like it.
That leaves you for the last word.
I don't know how to answer the question, honestly. I mean, I could say, yeah. I mean, are you asking what is the easiest or what lies for your instrument the best? Is that what you mean? Oh, I think Strauss again, and Mozart as well. Strauss and Mozart are my favorites. But the Strauss is much harder, usually. Occasionally, Mozart is really, really high, and so sometimes we bring in a smaller horn, like a descant horn, to help us come in with these delicate, soft, high notes. It's so, I don't know, rewarding to play Mozart, so I love that too.
Well, thank you all so much for your time and playing.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's so much fun.